Chapter 6, Kindergarten, Part 2, Less of a Struggle, plus Rocket Ships. The school bus can be a lonely place. Colleen isn't here. My dad talked to Colleen's mom on the phone yesterday, and they spoke about Colleen's grandma, who's okay, which was a big relief. And then they talked about something my dad called trouble in paradise, which doesn't sound good, but with all the other terrible things going on, I decided not to ask. Apparently Colleen's feeling better and will be in school later today, but she's staying at home this morning so she can talk with her grandma on the phone before the operation. My mom and dad said I could use my time on the bus to practice what I'd say to her. But this idea scares me, so I'm writing it in my book instead. Plus, I don't think my dad's advice right now is as good as some of the advice I've gotten from my family in the past, like how my nana gave me advice in kindergarten, the afternoon after my conversation with Miss Cotton. "How was school?" she asked, as we walked to the bus stop on our way to Chinatown. "Fine," I mumbled. She looked down at me and raised an eyebrow, and then the whole story spilled out. Starting with, at first I was scared of being squished, and ending with, I'm terrible at expressing myself and doomed to a friendless existence. I paused to catch my breath, caught up in my story, so I was surprised when I turned to my nene, and she was smiling. Yeah, she said, as if I hadn't just told a terrible and awful tale of tragedy. "We talk, yes?" "Of course," I said, confused, because that's the most obvious thing in the world. "And you understand me?" she prodded. "Yes, you are my nene. And you would say that you know me, yes? And I know you?" "Well, of course." I put my hands on my hips, but I don't understand how this Priscilla Lee Jenkins, I do not know much English. This startled me. "Well, yes," I said finally, "but last week you want me to read your story, but I did not know your words. Did that stop us?" "No," I said, thinking back. "I acted out the car chase until you understood, and we used your Chinese to English picture dictionary for the rest, and you taught me how to say dragon in Chinese." "Yes," she nodded. "See? You are so good at expressing without words. So show what you want your class to know about you. Think about it. And wah, this is the Chinese way of saying presto, or abracadabra, or oh my. Just give it time," she concluded. I thought about my nene's advice all through our visit to Chinatown, and during dinner, and even during the story my mom read me that night. But it wasn't until I was almost asleep that it hit me. Wah! Suddenly, I knew what to do. But that was kindergarten, not second grade, and I didn't know what to do today, or what to say to Colleen. So when she finally got to school just before quiet time, I was nervous and even a little scared. This was extra sad because we both love quiet time. It's our favorite part of the day. During quiet time, we sit and read, and usually I'm very excited about it. And nothing, or almost nothing, can distract me from my book because reading is the best. But as it turns out, today's quiet time was a little different than usual. Normally we sit at our desk during quiet time, and Miss Bloom sits at hers and reads too. But today, Miss Bloom said, "Let's shake things up a little. You've all been so good about quiet time that I think you've earned some special privileges. Who wants to sit in the hangout corner today while we read?" We all raised our hands because the hangout corner is fun, and there are colorful chairs that are soft and comfortable. "Maggie, Ben, and Sasha," Miss Bloom said. "Now, who wants to sit on the beanbag chairs?" This was an even better treat because the beanbag chairs are squishy and great. Plus, there are only 2 of them in the other corner of the classroom. So everyone raised their hands even more. "Cilla," Miss Bloom said. "And Colleen." She clapped her hands quickly. "All right. Everyone grab your books and let's go. Quiet time starts in 5, 4, 3. So I grabbed my book and raced to the beanbag chairs. I didn't even have time to be nervous because I'd be with Colleen, or to be surprised because Miss Bloom usually keeps us far apart at times like this because we do something called losing focus. Quiet time began. I sank into my beanbag chair and tried to concentrate on my book, but I couldn't. I looked over at Colleen in the beanbag chair right next to me. She wasn't reading either, but she wasn't looking at me. She was just looking down at the floor. I turned away quickly. Colleen was probably upset that she had to sit next to me because she didn't want to be my friend anymore. I decided that I was definitely moving to Alaska. But something made me look back because Colleen wasn't looking down in an angry way, I realized suddenly. She wasn't looking down like she didn't want to talk to me. Colleen was looking down and looking sad. Colleen was looking like she didn't know what to say. Colleen was being shy. I took a deep breath and then I called out in my quietest whisper, "Colleen," I said, trying not to move my mouth, because this was quiet time after all. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm sorry about your grandma, and I'm sorry I didn't say it yesterday, and I didn't mean to only talk about the blob." No, Colleen whispered back, finally looking up. I'm sorry. I didn't mean those things, and my mom says it was because I was upset. But that still isn't a reason to be mean to someone else. I felt awful for what I said. I could feel my eyes getting funny again, and I didn't want to be a baby. But when I looked at Colleen, she was blinking very fast, and this made me blink very fast. And then she sniffled, and then I sniffled. Cilla, she said. Colleen, I said, and then we were hugging each other across our beanbag chairs, and I tried not to, but I might have sort of wiped my nose on her shirt. And the funniest part is Miss Bloom didn't even get mad, even though we were definitely not using our privileges responsibly and everyone was looking at us. Miss Bloom just walked over, still reading her book, and put a box of tissues down between us. And then she walked back to her desk and sat back down. That afternoon at recess, Colleen and I ran out to play. What did you do at recess today? Colleen asked. I wrote in my book, I said. What story? I told her about what I'd written so far. How does it end? She asked. I giggled. You know, I said, tell me again, Colleen said, bouncing up and down and clapping her hands together. I love this story. So I did, and now that I'm home lying on my mom's fuzzy rug, I tried her desk, but it was too big for me. I'll tell you. First, let me set the scene. Setting the scene is a very important thing to do when you're a writer. It gives your reader an idea of what it's like to be somewhere during an exciting or interesting time. So imagine, reader, that all your classmates are sitting around Miss Cotton on the day she's going to read from your class book. Miss Cotton says, "Are you excited, everyone? We're going to see how the story turns out." And even I haven't seen the whole thing. And you nod your head along with everyone else, and you're very excited, though maybe a little nervous too, because your work is going to be read aloud to the whole class. Once upon a time, Miss Cotton begins, there was a cat. Miss Cotton drew the first page in the story, and there's an orange cat underneath a smiling sun, confirming your suspicions about her imagination, specifically that she doesn't have one. The cat liked flowers and picked some for her family. Annie Abbott's page has a white cat with pink flowers in its paw. And then the cat drew a picture to go with the flowers and put it in a frame. Nick Anderson's brown cat in a box of crayons. It was very pretty, and the cat gave the picture to her mom, and she smiled. Sally Bell, white cat wearing yellow slippers, which I liked. And it goes like that all the way to, and then the cat had some milk because she was thirsty. Billy Lane, of course. Imagine holding your breath, then, as the page flips to a page you know well because it's your page, and your first ever public reading has begun. And then, Miss Cotton continues, then pauses surprised because the page has changed and it's covered with Miss Lynn's pretty cursive handwriting. And then the cat found a rocket ship and went to have tea with the magical princess of the moon and ate cakes and chocolate cream puffs, and they had a great time, and the magical princess of the moon gave the kitten moon dust as a present. The cat was tired from all her travels, so when she got home she took a nap in her bed, which was made of the finest satin woven by fairy princesses and had been given to her as a gift by the friendly troll Znad, though that's a story for another time. And the picture along with the story is of the Princess of the Moon pouring tea for the kitten next to her magical moon throne with the rocket ship waiting nearby. And underneath it all, in big letters, it says, a page by Cilla Lee Jenkins. Miss Cotton turned the page. Then she clears her throat. And then the kitten woke up and decided to go for a walk. Michael Lerner, purple cat in a park. And then it shows the picture, a page by Cilla Lee Jenkins. And then your most amazing thing happens. What was your page? A girl sitting close by leans towards you, whispering excitedly. Yes, you whisper back nervously. Wow, the girl says. I'm sorry, I'm going back. It says, was that your page? A girl sitting close by leans towards you, whispering excitedly. Yes, you whisper back nervously. Wow, the girl says with a big smile. I want to visit the magical princess of the moon. I'm Cilla, you say to your first ever fan. I'm Colleen, she says back, and for the first time, you're glad to be in kindergarten. After story time, Miss Lynn came up to me and said, great story. And Miss Cotton said, what an imagination, Cilla. So I smiled and said, yes, thank you. Colleen and I went to recess together and sat on the swings, and I told her more about the magical princess of the moon, and she told me about her imaginary friend named Sheffield, who is a gigantic pink canary, and I knew that I'd found a best friend. After that day, I had someone to sit with at snack time and to play with on the playground. Colleen introduced me to Rosa and Sally. I even played with Sophie, and she wasn't so bad anymore, now that I had Colleen to be my friend. I liked kindergarten after that. As it turns out, you can learn a lot there. I learned that you don't have to play kickball at recess, especially when a best friend is there to help you build little houses for the fairies you've imagined, and who you're sure will come and live in them after dark. When you find a big stick buried in the dirt and want to pretend it's a dinosaur bone and that you've just made the scientific discovery of a lifetime, your best friend will pretend along with you, even though you both know it's probably just a stick. Your best friend will play with you on the bus, and you'll pretend your hands are dinosaurs and put on a show for only yourselves and laugh so hard that it takes you a minute to realize the whole bus is looking at you. But your best friend won't care. As I explained to my dad when I got off the bus today, and he asked me how it had gone with Colleen, it turns out that when there's a best friend involved, trouble with words isn't all that big a deal, because your best friend knows that there's more to you than the words you accidentally say or don't say. And you know the same thing about her. So when you're feeling shy and quiet or just sitting there happy that she's there too, like I was today, your best friend will sit with you. And it's okay to feel like not saying anything. Though this doesn't happen much, I found, because when there's a best friend involved, there's always things to talk about and more than enough words to go around. And I should know. Words are my life's work after all. Chapter 7, Questions. Right now, it's spring break, which is when you get a week off from school, and Miss Bloom goes to Aruba. Colleen's away too, though not in Aruba. She's visiting her grandma and grandpa, and she's going to be her grandma's special helper while she gets better. My spring break has been good. Colleen slept over at my house before she left, and we baked cookies and played in the yard and had an amazing time. I was happy that my mom suggested Colleen came over because the last time I had a sleepover at her house, it didn't go so well. Specifically, I got scared, and my dad had to come and take me home. I've been spending a lot of time with my mom and dad and with my Nene and Yeye and Grandma and Grandpa Jenkins. In fact, yesterday I got to go to work with Grandpa Jenkins, which is always a lot of fun. My Grandpa Jenkins is a lawyer, and he says I'll be a lawyer too when I grow up. This is because I ask lots of questions, such as, why is your hair disappearing? Or what's antifungal cream, and why is it in your bathroom? Grandpa Jenkins also says I'm an excellent bargainer. For example, when my grandpa takes me to the toy store for a special treat and tells me I can get one thing, I sometimes say, look, I'll tell you what, how about if I get the teddy bear and the stegosaurus, but not the sparkly cow stickers? Does that work for you? Even though this never actually works, and didn't work when it came to the blob, my Grandpa Jenkins always says, golly, the kid is perfect lawyer material. Golly is the Jenkins way of saying wow, or really, or ay ay. I went to work with Grandpa Jenkins because my mom and dad had to go to the doctors for the day. Babies in stomachs need to be checked out a lot, which isn't fair because the blob isn't even born yet, so I don't see why my mom and dad need to spend so much time with it. I spent the night before with my Nene and Yeye because my parents had to leave early for the blob's appointment. It was great, and Nene cooked sausage and rice, which is delicious. The next morning, Nene drove me to my grandma and Grandpa's house, and we sang in the car like we always do. And then I got to ride the train with Grandpa Jenkins, which is very exciting because I'm allowed to stand up as long as I hold on to the pole with both hands. Grandpa Jenkins works in a tall, tall building with big windows, 2 elevators, and a man named Harold who always opens the door for us and says, Silly Lee, give me 5. And I do, even though that's not my name, because Harold is nice. Lawyers sit in a big office and move papers around on their desks all day. My Grandpa Jenkins is especially good at this, and also at being on the telephone and saying, Don, I'll level with you. 50,000, take it or leave it. Grandpa Jenkins is the best lawyer out there. He told me so. When he goes to work, my grandpa wears a dark gray suit with a bow tie instead of a regular tie. He always has a handkerchief in his pocket, and the handkerchief has his initial on it, which he puts there himself because he likes to do something called embroidery, while he watches cowboy movies at night. On the way to work, he wears a straw hat with a dip at the top and a black band around it. My grandma calls him Dapper, my mom calls him Spiffy, and my dad calls him Hilarious. After I sat in Grandpa Jenkins' office all morning and drew new pictures for his walls, I'm his office official decorator, we went to lunch. This is another thing with lawyers. This is another big thing with lawyers. I had a grilled cheese sandwich with crispy, curly French fries. And when we were done, we split a piece of cake on the condition that he won't tell my mom and I won't tell my grandma. We went back to his office after lunch, and while he moved some more papers around, I spent some time with his secretary, named Pam, who's very nice and calls me a treasure. Pam's desk is outside in the lobby, right next to a giant fish tank that's fun to sit by. Pam wears very high heels, which is exciting because I love high heels. They make you tall, and you can use them to make homes for worms in your backyard. Also, when you hook high heels on your ears, they stay on. Unfortunately, I will never, ever, do you hear me, young lady? Ever be allowed to wear high heels of my own until I'm 25, which is my punishment for the time I accidentally used my mom's special Prada heels to dig in the dirt. And then I got mud all over the rug when I came inside the house because the shoes were on my ears and the dirt kept falling and I didn't realize it. My mom was not happy, to say the least. Anyway, yesterday Pam let me help her bring around coffee and tea to the lawyers in the office, which brings me back to the questions, because lawyers, as I mentioned before, ask a lot of them. Yesterday, when I run around visiting with the coffee, everyone wanted to know, number 1, how are you? Number 2, would you like some candy? Number 3, how's school? Number 4, what grade are you in? Number 5, wait, really? They grow up so fast and that makes you how old? And number 6, wow, time flies when you get old. Cilla, did you know that? Usually the questions are the same, but today there was a lawyer there who I hadn't met before. Though Pam said he had been at the firm for a long time, his name was Mr. Lewis, and he was very nice, and has hair that's silver, like the pieces of hair my grandpa Jenkins has just on the sides of his head. Mr. Lewis offered me candy from the bowl on his desk, and he asked me a new question. Lee Jenkins, he said, quite a special heritage. Thank you, I said, because being special is always a good thing, so it was definitely a compliment. So he went on smiling. Where are you from? I had to think about this for a minute. I'm supposed to be on my best behavior at my Grandpa Jenkins' office, which mostly means saying please and thank you a lot, but which also means that I need to give polite grown-up answers to questions, even if I don't understand what they're asking. But I figured it out and told him my address. Yes, he said, offering me another piece of candy, which I took again, because even though it wasn't chocolate, peppermint's still delicious. I mean, where are you from originally? I had to think about this. I knew there was something he wanted to know, but I didn't think I understood the question, so I decided to give him the most honest answer. My mom's stomach, I said. I think this was an okay answer because he didn't ask anything else after that. He just said, oh, and looked surprised, which was strange because I'm pretty sure most adults are supposed to know all about babies and stomachs. Come on, Cilla. Mom poked her head into the office, and she must have just heard a funny joke because she was trying not to laugh. Your grandpa's looking for you, and Mr. Lewis probably needs to get back to work. Okay, I said. Bye, Mr. Lewis. Thank you for the candy. I'm excellent at best behavior. You're welcome, he said. He still looked confused, but I figured he'd catch up eventually. It's funny because even though Mr. Lewis didn't ask me as many questions as everyone else, I was still thinking about his question later in the day when we were getting ready to go. I had just finished saying goodbye to Pam and the fish when my grandpa said, You're looking thoughtful, Cilla, dear. Everything all right? Yes, I said as we stepped into the elevator, and it was, mostly. Lawyers really do ask a lot of questions, don't they? I asked, after the elevator's doors had closed behind us. Golly, Cilla, he laughed. You're absolutely right. It's exhausting, isn't it? Yes, I said. I don't know how they get all their work done and lunches eaten with all the time they spend on questions. Golly and Aya. Maybe I'll look into being a lawyer as a backup job if I ever want a break from the best-selling writing. I know it would make my grandpa happy, but I don't think it will happen. Even though I like knowing things, I don't think I like questions as much as lawyers do, no matter what Grandpa Jenkins says. Even though Mr. Lewis said nice things about me, I still didn't like his question, because this happened to me before. I get asked questions a lot, like where are you from and what are you, which is the only one I have a good answer to. And I used to think these questions were because people could tell I was special, which I am, of course, because destiny. But now I'm not sure if this kind of special is a good thing to be. I wonder why people need to know these things. I wonder why they're always so surprised to know the answers. And I wonder if I'm doing something wrong that makes them need to ask. Yesterday, when I got home from my grandpa's office, my mom and I cuddled on the couch, and I looked at her stomach for a long time. I thought about how everyone will know who I am someday, because I'll be famous, so no one will need to ask me questions about my family anymore, or what I am, or where I'm from. They'll just know. But they won't know about the blob, because the blob will be a normal, not famous baby, and I wonder if the blob will be asked where it's from, and I wonder if its answer will be and I wonder what its answer will be. And will people be able to tell that we're sisters, or will they have to ask about that too? I put my ear on Mom's stomach and listened. I almost patted it, and I almost asked it if it would kick this much when it came out of her stomach, and if it was maybe a secret ninja, which would be great. But then I remembered I'm not excited for it to come. I didn't talk about Mr. Lewis either because my parents were smiling and happy, and they put on music and danced, and my dad showed me something he calls the tango, but my mom calls embarrassing yourself. But then she did it too and seemed to be having a great time, so it can't be that bad. And I didn't want to make them sad, so I didn't ask my questions. I'm not brave or a lawyer, and sometimes I even think that I don't want to know the answers at all, so I guess I never will. Chapter 8, First Grade Reading and Other Struggles, also Aliens. Tonight my mom read to me from Selena Moon and the Moonstone, which is my favorite book. It's about a girl named Selena Moon who's brave and smart and finds out that she can change the color of the sky with the powers of her mind. She and her best friend Colin and his pet chimera, Evelyn, have adventures together, and they foil the plans of the evil sorcerer lord, though he promises revenge, as evil sorcerers lords do. This is important in the second book, Selena Moon and the Prophecy of the Waxing Crescent, because Colin is kidnapped by the sorcerer lord, and Selena and Evelyn have to find him before it's too late. There's a lot of suspense and drama. Also dragonfire and car chases. My copy of Selena Moon has cracks on its cover inside. Its pages are wavy and soft at the edges, and some of them are a little wrinkled. This is because I read Selena Moon all the time. I even keep it at my bedside table and sometimes in my bed just because I like to have it near me. And when I want to reread my favorite scene or a moment when a character said something funny or did something great, I like to have it by me so I can open it right away. Even though I can read Selena Moon by myself, of course, I still like when my mom reads it to me, too. She does great voices for all the characters, and the blob kicked when my mom read, which means it at least has good taste in books. Before she said goodnight, my mom asked me to write a story for her to read when she's in the hospital, so she'll have something from me close by. I like that idea, even if I don't like the reason she'll be there. I decided that my story would be about a penguin, but I changed my mind later and decided it would be about a moose, and then an elephant, and then maybe a toucan. There are so many options. My mom also said that she's sorry she's been so tired lately. Her stomach is getting really big now, and sometimes when she walks, she waddles like a duck. Apparently, this is an opinion I should keep to myself. I know this because I didn't, and then I got in trouble, and then my dad laughed, and he got in trouble. But even though I was disappointed and kind of mad when we couldn't go to the park yesterday because she needed to lie down, I said, "It's okay, Mommy, I understand." And my mom smiled and gave me a hug, and she said she loved me very much, which was nice. Now I'm in bed, but I don't feel like reading anymore. And it's funny because even though I love Selena Moon more than any other book in the world, lying here next to it reminds me of a time when it didn't always make me feel that great. In fact, there was a time when I'd look at my copy of Selena Moon and feel really, really bad, even though it was my favorite book, which is a confusing way to feel. This is a story I don't talk about much because it has a lot of struggles and some bad feelings in it, but there are good parts too, and it's an important story if you really want to know who the real Cilla or Elidora or Panzanella was as a child. Let me set the scene. It was the first day of first grade. Mr. Ogden introduced himself, and we played a game where we said our names and shared 2 funny things that describe us. We had to sit in alphabetical order, which meant I wasn't next to Colleen, but we were close enough that we could make silly faces at each other from across the aisle. And then Mr. Ogden wrote a few sentences on the board and asked everyone to copy them so he could see us practice our handwriting. And suddenly, even though I was in a class with Colleen and Tim's number 1 and number 2 and Valerie and lots of people I knew I liked, I didn't feel like a part of them anymore. Not even Colleen, my best friend, because they all looked at the board and knew that instead of letters, they saw words, and maybe even instead of words, they saw a sentence, and instead of a sentence, maybe even a story. But I didn't. I couldn't, because I had a secret. I, Cilla Jenkins, future author extraordinaire, didn't know how to read. I don't know why I had this problem, and I don't know how it happened. But sometime over summer break, Colleen had started reading parts of Selena Moon on her own, and now suddenly all the other kids could read too. And even though I wanted to read more than anything, and even though I practiced every day over the summer with my mom and dad, I still couldn't do it. On that day in first grade, all I could do was look at the board and draw shapes. My face was hot, and every new line I drew with my pencil made my stomach feel tight, because what if I was copying a smudge instead of part of an actual letter? And how was I supposed to know the difference? And how did everyone else already know the difference? That night, after my parents finished reading to me and kissed me goodnight, I opened my copy of Selena Moon. I looked hard at the pages, and I decided to make them make sense to me. But all I saw were letters, and I knew there were rules about the sounds they made, but I couldn't remember what they were. And this made me sad again, but it also made me angry, and I threw my book, my Selena Moon, away from me. It hit the ground with a loud thud, and I felt terrible, and I rushed out of bed to make sure it was okay. This is where my parents found me, because Selena made a lot of noise. My dad picked me up and carried me back to bed and sat with me until I stopped crying. And when he asked me what was the matter, I told him that I would never be an author, because how can you be destined for literary greatness or anything great at all when you can't even read your favorite book? It didn't help that as first grade went on, I had to go to a special reading class with Miss Brown every Tuesday and Thursday, while the rest of the class had reading and snack time. My parents said it would be fun, and that there was nothing wrong with seeing Miss Brown, and maybe I'd meet some new people and make new friends, but this wasn't helpful, because I wanted to have fun with Colleen, and the friends I already had, the friends who could read. And if there was nothing wrong with it, then why did we have to leave class while everyone else stayed behind and did fun projects? Besides, there was only one other student from Mr. Ogden's class who had to go to Miss Brown's class too, and I already knew that we were not going to be friends. This was because he was an annoying individual, a very annoying individual, and his name was Ben McGee. Here are a few things you should know about Ben McGee, which I noticed during those first weeks of Miss Brown's class. Number one, he was definitely not shy. He always talked to the other kids at the table, even though he didn't know them. And even though he was new in school, new kids are always supposed to be quiet and scared. This is a rule. He was very curious and was always asking questions like, is your refrigerator running, and why, and what's up, Silly Lee? The answer to that is nothing, because Silly Lee is not my name. He had a hard time concentrating on work too, which is how he sometimes noticed me watching him. And then he would ask me questions, see above, or he'd make faces, which were usually not funny, though sometimes I'd laugh because I couldn't help it, and then we'd get in trouble. He knew all about the San Diego Zoo and talked about zoo animals all the time because his family had taken a trip there. And he said that manatees were boring, even though I love manatees, even though I've never seen one, because on the day he was there, the manatee just sat in its tank. He didn't drink his juice at snack time, so I drank it for him. He smelled. Somehow I knew this. It was in the way he moved. But the really, really important thing you should know about Ben McGee isn't something you could see right away. I didn't see it at first either, until one day, when I was getting ready to leave for Miss Brown's class. We were all getting our snacks from our cubbies, and from across the room I heard Colleen and a few other kids laughing. "What's so funny?" I asked, walking over to them. "We're writing stories and reading today," Tim number 1 said, and Sasha had a great idea for one. "Oh," I said, "will you tell?" But just then Miss Brown came up and I had to go. "Have a good time, Cilla," Colleen waved. "I'll miss you." That was nice to hear, but then I saw her bounce over to her group, and they all had smiles and laughed again about a story that wasn't mine, a story that everyone would get to read, and I despaired. Only when we get to reading, Ben McGee wouldn't let me despair in peace, which was frustrating. We were using little squares with letters on them to make words, which was actually fun, even though I was trying hard not to enjoy myself. "Hey," he whispered as I sat playing with my squares, "Silly Lee." "My name's not Silly Lee," I said, forgetting to ignore him. "Oh, right, Silly Lee Jenkins," he grinned. "You are so annoying, Ben McGee," I sighed. "That's not original at all. Being original is very important to me." Don't care, he said, which I knew he'd say because he's unoriginal. Plus, that's what he always says when I accuse him of being unoriginal, which is all the time. So, he said after another minute, even though I was clearly trying to get back to my game. What you doing? Nothing, I said, taking a deep breath and trying to sound quiet, because that's what you're supposed to do when things are tragic. Just being sad. Why? He asked. Because I said. Because why? Why do you ask so many questions? I huffed. I don't know, he said, just because. I shook my head and went back to my tiles. Is it because everyone else gets to write stories today? He asked after a minute. I looked at him surprised. I figured that was it. He went on. Since you're a giant book nerd and all. You are a pain, Ben McGee, I said, hotly glaring at him. I'm just saying what you are, he said. Besides, everyone knows that your story would have been the best if you'd been able to write one too. So you don't have to get mad. Being a book nerd isn't a bad thing. I didn't know what to say. You're a funny boy, Ben McGee, I said finally. He shrugged. Yeah, I know, my mom says that too. She says she doesn't know where I get it from, and it must be my dad's side of the family. But Dad said he doesn't know where I get it from either. He says I might as well have dropped in from outer space. So it's a mystery. And suddenly, everything changed. When I went back to class that day, I ran up to Colleen. Colleen, I said, you'll never guess what happened in reading. What? Colleen asked. I found out the most amazing thing about Ben McGee. I said, Ben McGee. I paused to add drama. Ben McGee is an alien. What? An alien, I confirmed. It all makes sense now. But just then Mr. Ogden told us to sit down for math, and then Marcy Thompson wanted to sit with us at lunch and wouldn't leave us alone at recess either. And writing a delay like this is called suspense, and it's a good thing to have, but in real life it's just called annoying, especially when Marcy Thompson is involved. Luckily, Colleen and I got a seat on the bus all to ourselves that afternoon, so I could explain everything. You see, I said, picking up where I'd left off, because you can do that with a best friend. It all makes sense now. He only came to our school in first grade, and his own mother doesn't know where he came from, and his dad says he's from outer space. Ben McGee is an alien sent here to gather information about us for his people. But why elementary school? Colleen asked. Why would he come to Mr. Ogden's class if he wanted to learn about humans? Wouldn't he go somewhere important with adults, like the post office or gas station? I added, realizing she was right. Unless he made a mistake, unless he didn't know what humans look like, and when he came here he got confused and didn't take on the right kind of disguise. Colleen was with me now. He's super good at math, she said, leaning in excitedly. He knew all the answers in our lesson on animals that live in the desert today, I added. He doesn't know that new students are supposed to be shy and scared, the way he loves animals and talks about the zoo all the time, the way he doesn't understand how to call people by their names. Ben McGee, I summed up, is an alien sent to Earth to study us, but he accidentally landed in the wrong place. The desert, Colleen specified, and saw nothing around but desert animals. Camels, which explains why he never drinks his juice. Yes, Colleen said, bouncing up and down. He thought the camels were people, so he turned into one and only realized his mistake when actual humans came and took him to the zoo, and he had to live there until he could escape without being seen, when someone, Mrs. McGee, yes, Mrs. McGee, came too close to the camel cage, and now he's disguised as her son, Colleen concluded, throwing her hands out wide in excitement. His real alien face lurking behind the human face of the first grader known as Ben McGee. I threw my hands out too, waiting to bring information about us back to his people. That, Colleen said, slumping back in her seat, is the best story I've heard all year. Chapter 9, First Grade, Part 2, More Aliens in Halloween. I enjoyed first grade a little more after that day with Alien Face McGee, and I was having more fun in reading because the games we played were great, and Miss Brown said my reading was improving in something called leaps and bounds. But I still wanted to read Selena Moon more than anything in the world, so it was very important to me that everything was perfect for one of my favorite holidays of all time, Halloween. Halloween is very special to me. It's all about imagination, after all. I always make my costume and my mom and dad help, though sometimes they say my costumes need to be something called actually possible to create, like the year I wanted to be a, well, I'm probably going to say this wrong, sarcophagus? Maybe a dinosaur? Though, to be fair, my dad didn't say no right away. He said, when I told him about it. But then my mom said, Nathan, And my dad said, we have a lot of plywood, and Mom said, absolutely not. And Dad said, we could put it on wheels, and Mom said, Nathan, please, with her eyebrows raised, an apparent look in my direction. So I was a dinosaur princess instead. I'm also not allowed to start my Halloween costume until September 1st, because apparently my parents don't appreciate it when I start making costume sketches in January. But that still gives me lots of time to find a costume. And that year in first grade, Colleen and I knew exactly what we wanted to be. We were going to be, who else? Selena and Colin from Selena Moon, because they were our favorite characters. Our plans were going perfectly, too. Until one day on the playground when Colleen had just told me that her dad had an old purple suit jacket that she could wear for her Colin costume, and that her mom had an old cane that I could use for Selena's staff. We were both excited about this news and jumping up and down, which made the beads Colleen sometimes wears in her hair clack like they were excited too. Yay, I said, because our costumes were going to be the best ever. Did you say Selena Moon? A voice cut in. Neither of us had noticed Sasha Simpson standing by us next to the slides. I didn't know her very well, mostly because I was scared to talk to her, because she had lots of friends and was really good at telling funny jokes. Plus her hair always stayed brushed. I love Selena Moon, Sasha exclaimed. I'm going to be Selena for Halloween too. My mom's already ordered the deluxe costume pack online. It even comes with a temporary sun tattoo, just like Selena's. I looked at Sasha surprised. You like Selena Moon? Yeah, that movie was so cool. Everyone's going to be someone from Selena Moon this year. Connor's already ordered his Colin costume, which looks just like the one from the movie. It even has the green jacket, which will all match. Oh, I said, I wasn't sure how I felt about this. That's nice, Colleen said, hesitating. What, you guys haven't seen it? Sasha said. No, we saw it, Colleen said, and it was okay, but they got a few things wrong, like Colin's jacket is purple, not green, and they cut out some really exciting parts. I sat quietly trying to help Colleen, like the story with Selena's mom. Oh, I haven't read the book, Sasha laughed, but I'm a total Selena fan. You two don't like the movie. She looked confused. I did. I wasn't sure what to say. It's just that if this was a book first, before a movie, I tried to explain, and the books are, well, books, and the story's so much more exciting when it's in your head. I guess, Sasha shrugged, but between you and me, Erica, Liz, and Sally, we'll have a classroom full of Selenas, and then Colleen, Connor, and the two Tims as Colin. You guys had better order your costumes before they all sell out. And then she skipped away, back to her friends on the slide, singing, We're all going to match on Halloween. This'll be so cool. Colleen and I watched her go, and I saw Colleen's shoulders droop. Suddenly, my brilliant Halloween costume plan didn't seem so great anymore. That night, I was quiet and distracted. In fact, I was in a state of general artistic despair, and so not paying attention to anything, which my parents realized right around the time my mom mentioned dessert, and I didn't even notice. Cilla, my mom said, putting down her fork and speaking in her concerned voice. Is everything okay? No, I mumbled finally. What's wrong? My dad said, putting his fork down in his concerned voice. Do you want to talk about it? Yes, I said, putting down my fork, because it seemed to be the thing to do. Colleen and I were going to be Selena Moon characters for Halloween, but I told them about Sasha and all the other kids and how this meant that everyone would think that Colleen and I were just regular Selena Moon movie fans instead of special book fans, and everything was awful. Well, I'm sorry, Cilla, my dad said. Maybe we can make you a different costume from Selena Moon so you don't look like everyone else. No, I said, it won't be the same. No costume is as good as the real-life book Selena, not the imaginary movie kind, and all of the other characters are taken out too. I bet even Alien Face McGee is going to dress up as someone from the Selena Moon movie. For Cilla Lee Jenkins, my mom cut me off, and not in a changing the subject kind of way. I could tell she was not happy. What have I told you about calling people names? It's not a mean name, plus I haven't actually called them that, I pointed out reasonably. It's just a story I made up. Cilla, my mom sighed, and ran her hands through her hair. It might be just a story to you, but you still can't call people names. But the creature calling itself Ben McGee, I began. Mom glared. Ben McGee, I corrected myself, calls me names too. He calls me Silly Lee Jenkins and a giant book nerd. I stopped short. Well, you're right, my mom admitted. It's not nice of him to say those things, but that doesn't mean, she went on. But I wasn't listening anymore. Suddenly, I had an idea. On Halloween, my favorite night of the year, the moon was full and round and the sky was dark, with wisps of black clouds at its edge. The leaves were crispy and red, and the jack-o'-lanterns on our neighbors' porches shone yellow and orange in the dark. This was perfect for creating mood and atmosphere, which are both very important in stories. It felt like Halloween, but without being too scary, which is also very important in my opinion. I'd promised my mom that I wouldn't call Alien-Faced McGee names or tell anyone at school my story about him, and I'd mostly kept that promise. I only talked about it with Colleen, who already knew, and maybe Sally, and Colleen had thought it was such a good story that she told Valerie and Tim number 2 and number 1, but that's it. One thing I definitely not told anyone about, though, was my Halloween costume. Colleen and I had made a solemn pinky swear promise not to say what we were going to be. On Halloween, my street was full of kids in costumes. There were some witches and ghosts, but mostly there were Selenas and Collins. Colleen and I walked side by side, our parents not too far behind. I was people watching, so it didn't take me long to spot Sasha, Connor, the Tims, and a whole group of kids from Mr. Ogden's first grade class, all trick-or-treating. Colleen and I smiled at each other nervously, and then began to wave. Sasha and Connor and the Tims, all in the costumes their moms had brought them, saw us. Each of us wore a giant cardboard box, which my dad helped us cut, so there was one big hole at the top for our heads and 2 small holes at the sides for our arms. On the front, back, and each side were exact copies of the cover and spine of Selena Moon and the Moonstone for me, and Selena Moon and the Prophecy of the Waxing Crescent for Colleen, which we had spent the entire month of October painting in my garage, with my parents helping us with the writing parts, because we were the Selena Moon books for Halloween. "Whoa," Sasha said, "you guys look amazing." "Thanks," I said, smiling. Sasha was wearing her Selena Moon Deluxe costume pack, but I noticed that she'd added to it too, with a belt that was painted with glitter glue and had all the star and moon symbols that were on Selena's real belts in the book and in the movie. And I realized that Sasha was really and truly a Selena Moon fan too, though nothing can ever be quite as good as the Selena Moon books. They're bestsellers, after all. "You look great, too, Selena," I said, which made Sasha smile even wider. "That must have taken forever," Connor said, examining Colleen's costume. "There's writing on the back, too," Colleen said, proudly turning around so he could see. "Also, I'm wearing a purple, because I'm a Colleen-themed book, and I'm a Selena-themed book," I grinned. "This is great," Sasha exclaimed. "Cilla and Colleen are our mascots and biggest fans of all. Hooray for Selena Moon," Colleen cheered. She always knows just what to say. "Let's go trick-or-treating," and one of the Tims yelled, and we all said yay and set off as a group, the Selena Moon book and movie fans. I'd fallen behind Colleen because I needed to readjust my cardboard box when I heard someone next to me saying, "Nice." I turned. There was a boy in an animal mask with a backpack stuffed under an old sweater to give him a hump. "Do you like it?" The unmistakable voice of Ben McGee came from behind the mask. "Camels are my favorite animal. I always ask my mom to take me to see them when we go to the zoo." "It's very nice," I said, trying to hide my reaction, since I'd made a promise to my mom and all. "Yours is okay," Ben McGee said, gesturing to my costume. I opened my mouth to say something back, because I was sure he was making fun of me, but he kept going before I could think of anything good. "But book 2 is my favorite. When Selena and Evelyn have to work together to stop the witch's prophecy." I'm sorry, there's a question. "When Selena and Evelyn have to work together to stop the witch's prophecy? Best chapter ever." Slowly, I closed my mouth. "You like the Selena Moon books?" I looked at him suspiciously, expecting him to laugh and say, "Just kidding, silly." "They're my favorites," he said. "My mom reads them to me every night." I didn't know what to say, so finally I just said, "Thank you, Ben McGee. You gave me the idea with the whole book nerd thing." The camel had tilted to the side, thinking. "Cool," he said. "I'd never think to make a book costume, though, and I love books and stories. Someone told me a story the other day, too, about how I was an alien from outer space who turned into an animal and then went to the zoo before finally coming home. Before finally becoming me. Have you heard it?" I said, looking around to see if my mom was close enough to hear. She wasn't, and I was surprised, because suddenly I felt kind of bad. I didn't want to hurt Ben McGee's feelings. There was no way around it. I might have been the person who made it up, I admitted, finally, afraid to look at him. "Wait, really?" He pushed up his mask, and he was smiling. "This is awesome. No one's ever made up a story about me before. What kind of animal was I?" "After the alien and before first grade. You'll never guess, I smiled back. I swear I didn't know camels were your favorite animal, I explained. When I made the story up, it just came to me when I put all the evidence together. We walked off, just behind the others, me, Cilla, Jenkins, Selena Moon, and the Moonstone, and Ben McGee, alien and camel, as I told him his story. At the end of the evening, as our moms were getting ready to take us home, and I was already counting how many chocolate bars I'd gotten in my head, he said, "Bye, Silly Lee. Happy Halloween." I didn't even get mad. I just said, "Happy Halloween to you too, alien-faced McGee." It wasn't long after Halloween that I opened Selena Moon one day and didn't see the letters or T and H rules, or even sentences. I opened it up and I saw a story. My mom, Dad, and Mr. Ogden called it developmental, which they said means that my brain was growing, and one day it was ready to read. So I guess this part of the story doesn't really have a middle, which all good stories should have. It's usually the part where the hero is slowly getting better at something, like sword fighting or dragon taming or reading. In a movie, there'd be music playing while this happened, and then at the end, everyone would celebrate, and maybe there'd be fireworks or trumpets. But as it turns out, when you've spent 7 years of your life wanting to read more than anything else in the whole world, once you learn, there's just so much to catch up on that you don't even think about asking for fireworks. You're too busy reading. Sometimes when I'm lying in bed and looking at Selena Moon, I trace the lines and wrinkles that I made that night when I got so mad that I threw my book away from me. My mom offered to buy me a new copy, but I didn't want one, because even though they were made because of struggles, I don't mind those marks anymore. In fact, sometimes I look at them and imagine that someday, if I'm really lucky, and destiny was really and truly right that day by the gumball machine, maybe my book will be the first book where the letters come together for someone. Maybe my book will be the first book someone ever reads. Alien-faced McGee caught up soon too. And when he couldn't quite finish a book, or if it was feeling too hard, I'd act the end out for him or make up an ending, if I hadn't read the book, as a good writer should. Okay, chapter 10 is colors. The school year is almost over now, which is sad because I love Miss Bloom, and school is really fun, which is why I haven't been writing much lately. But then yesterday, I looked at my mom's stomach and realized how much the blob's been growing. So I know I need to hurry to get this book done in time. Miss Bloom keeps asking us to reflect on what we've learned this year, which is easy because we've learned so much. The water cycle, multiplication, how to write an acoustic poem, how to line up, well, almost, quietly. And this isn't all I've learned. From my mom, I learned how to bake chocolate chip cookies, and my dad's taught me to change a light bulb. You do this by being very careful and always keeping hold of the ladder with one hand and foot and asking an adult's permission. Also, there's a little glass bulb involved, but this seems less important than everything else. From my grandma Jenkins, I learned how to tell the difference between azaleas and rhododendrons. And my grandpa Jenkins taught me how to make an embroidery cross stitch. From my yaya, I learned how to measure wood before an adult cuts it to make a shelf. And from my nene, I learned that when moms grow babies in their stomachs, they should eat rice and ginger all the time. My mom hates this, but she tells my dad that nene needs to feel like she's part of the process, and besides, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. I don't know what dogs have to do with it, but I was excited when my mom said this because maybe it means we're getting a pet. Though I'd prefer a puppy, actually. I want to teach it tricks, especially juggling. Anyway, all these things have been fun to learn, but none of them are quite as important as the one big thing I learned last week, and this has to do with pictures. It all began when Miss Bloom told us we were going to paint a family portrait, and then put our pictures up all over the classroom for everyone to see at the end of the year party. This way, we had finished the year by celebrating who we are and the people who support us. Miss Bloom says a picture is worth 1,000 words, which as a future best-selling author sounds highly suspicious to me. But at first, the project was exciting. I love family portraits, and I already knew that mine would have everyone in it. My grandma and Grandpa Jenkins, Nene, Yay, Mom, Dad, and the garden gnome Miss Tibbs gave us, because her daughter-in-law had given it to her, which meant she couldn't throw it away. My mom wasn't sure if she could accept it when Mrs. Tibbs told us all this, but luckily I was there to say yes. Mrs. Tibbs said, "I knew I could count on you, Cilla," holding the gnome out to my mom. And my mom said, "Yes, that's our Cilla," in a little voice that wasn't supposed to sound like a sigh, but did, and she took the gnome with both hands. Horatio, which is the name I named the gnome, is very heavy, I found out later when I tried to bring him inside for a tea party and dropped him on the new umbrella stand. Don't worry, he was okay. The umbrella stand, not so much. Horatio had a spot of honor in my picture, also a red hat. This was very convenient because Mrs. Bloom told us to use at least 6 colors in our pictures, 3 regular ones and 3 that we'd mixed. Think about your colors, she said, and when you go home this weekend, take a careful look at the people and things around you. What you think of as just brown hair may be light brown with streaks of red. What you imagine as blue eyes may be blue-green. Color is all around us, and it's a lot more complicated than we think. Now, at first I didn't really see what Miss Bloom meant. I love colors, and I'm very good at picking them out because I have creative talents. I know this because my mom said she desperately needed my creative talents to help her choose what the baby will wear when she comes home. I picked some excellent clothes, and I'll admit that it was a little fun, especially when I found a pair of purple pajamas with blue polka dots, yellow socks with orange polka dots, and a green hat with red polka dots and dinosaurs on it, which was great. So when I started my picture, the colors seemed easy. I used red for Horacio's hat and then mixed it with white to make pink for his face. My other colors, though, got a bit trickier. For my Grandma and Grandpa Jenkins, I used gray for their hair, though Grandpa Jenkins doesn't have much, pink for their faces and blue for their eyes. The colors for my Nene and Yeye were harder to figure out, but I finally found little peach for their faces and dark brown for their eyes. I found a dark gray for Yeye's thick hair and black for my Nene's. Then came my mom and dad, and of course me. My parents were easy now that my grandparents were figured out. My mom had both her parents' pink skin and blue eyes, and after a long moment, I decided to give her a very, very small bump in her stomach for the baby whose name I won't say. Small enough that you wouldn't notice if you didn't know it was there. Though that's not what it looks like in real life because it's getting really big. My dad had Nene and Yeye's peach skin and dark brown eyes, and his hair was black and straight like theirs. I gave my mom and dad matching red shirts because they like to tell me they're a team. But sometimes my dad tells my mom that she needs to be more of a team player, so I don't think they have it totally figured out yet. I thought maybe the matching shirts would help. And then there was then there was me, Priscilla Lee Jenkins. I've painted lots of pictures of myself before, and they weren't hard, but I'd spent so much time thinking about colors that I suddenly began to notice things I never thought about before, like how my skin isn't like my parents'. It's darker than my mom's, but a different color than my dad's. Not pink, not peach. My hair isn't black, but it's a dark, dark brown. At the end, none of the colors I used to draw me were the same colors I used for the rest of my family. We hung our pictures on the wall when we were done, and we had free time and got to look at everyone else's portraits. Colleen had painted her mom, her dad, and her 2 brothers, plus her pet goldfish. It was a great picture, and Miss Bloom said, "You captured the family resemblance so well." From Alien Face McGee's picture, I found out that he had a little sister and 2 cats along with his parents. Colleen said she liked mine, and Alien Face wanted to know all about Horatio, which was a fun story to tell, but something didn't feel right. I didn't know what it was until Colleen looked at my picture and said, "I like your drawings, Celia. They're all really far apart, though." And she was right. I saw suddenly. All the other families had been drawn standing together, holding hands, smiling at each other, some even playing games. In my picture, I stood in the middle with my mom, dad, and the blob. My grandpa and grandma Jenkins stood next to us off to one side, and my Nene and Yeye stood on the other side, the whole page in between them. "It's no big deal," Colleen said, but it was. That day, when I got home from school, I went to look at my mom and dad's wedding photo, which they keep on a shelf above the couch. Mostly, I like this photo. My mom and dad are younger than I ever thought they could be. My mom's hair is long and curls at the end, and her dress is like a real-life fairy princess's with white lace and a skirt that poofs and goes all the way to the floor. This is the first photo, my mom says, of her and my dad as a married couple, but it's also special for another reason that we don't talk about, because it's the only photo ever taken with all of my grandparents in it. In the photo, my mom and dad are in the center, holding hands. Grandma and Grandpa Jenkins are standing side by side next to Mom. And at the opposite end of the picture, my Nene and Yeye are standing next to my dad. Everyone's dressed up and everyone's smiling, except I know better. That smile isn't my Grandpa Jenkins' smile when he gets a big piece of chocolate cake, or my Grandma Jenkins when she claps for me in the school play. It's not my Nene's smile when I read her story, and it's not my Yeye's when I find him the perfect tie. In this picture, my grandparents are pretending, and real families don't look like that. Real families don't have grandparents who stand as far away from each other as possible in photos when you draw them. Real families don't have nenes who say things like, "I have errands," when she drops you off at your grandma and grandpa's and you suggest she come in to say hi. Real families don't have grandmas who say, "Oh, I don't think your Nene or Nene or however you say it would want to hear from me, dear." when you suggest that they get together for lunch because they both love cookies and tea and pretty plates. Real families don't have grandpas who say your yay reads you stories too in a surprised voice. And then golly, I just never imagined that, which makes no sense because of course yay reads me stories. He loves them almost as much as I do. And real families don't have yayas who sometimes forget to speak in English when he's talking to your parents, or moms who have to smile and pretend her feelings aren't hurt when he does. They all come to the wedding. It took a lot of convincing. I once heard my dad tell a friend when he thought I wasn't listening, but in the end, my grandparents wanted my parents to be happy. But that doesn't change the fact that the only other time my grandparents were ever together after that, and the only time when we were really all together was that day in the hospital when my parents piled all of those names on me. Cilla, Lee, and Jenkins, all those family names on one tiny baby, all in a family that didn't even want to be a family, and they didn't even take a picture. And now my mom and dad are going to have another baby, a regular blob baby, not a genius like me, a baby who's going to have even more names stuck on her. And I'll be the only other person who really understands what it's like to be a Lee Jenkins, and having a big sister responsibilities means that I'll be the one who has to protect my little sister from the rude individuals and tough crowds and cousin Helen's and Mr. Lewis's. So the picture I drew isn't worth 1,000 words because I don't think this can be done, no matter how many words I use. That Saturday, I went to spend the afternoon with my Grandma Jenkins. We were sitting in the kitchen rolling out cookie dough, and I thought about Miss Bloom and how the colors on my grandma's hands weren't just pink, but were all sorts of things. There were red spots and white spots and pink dots of blue. There were so many colors, and none of them were the same as the colors on my skin. Grandma, I said suddenly, do you mind that I'm not like you? And she paused mid-roll and turned to me with a funny expression. What do you mean, Priscilla, dear? I'm your granddaughter, I said, trying to explain, and I'm not like you. Why, Cilla, she said, smiling, you're so much like me. I paused and looked at her like I didn't believe her, but she just laughed. Want to know a secret, she asked? Yes, I said, not sure how this was an answer to my question. But I love secrets, I can't lie. Grandma Jenkins leaned in close. Your mom told me about the gnome and the umbrella stand. When I was little, I wanted to play imaginary games with the paperweight shaped like a crane that my mother, who you are named for, kept in her fancy parlor. I made a nest for it in her best china, and guess what happened? No, I gasped, already guessing. She nodded. I dropped it and destroyed a whole tea set. I'm just like you. Just like me, my grandma confirmed, putting a flour-coated arm around my shoulders. A Jenkins woman through and through. No, I said thoughtfully. Also elite. The next day, I was at my Nene and Yeye's house, and I helped my Nene make dumplings while my Yeye worked in his workshop. My Nene rolled the dough and put the dumpling balls inside, and it was my job to pinch them shut at the top, which gave me time to think and to watch my Nene's hands move fast and quick, a blur of lots of colors too, yellow and white and pink and bits of brown and red. Nene, I said, do you mind that I don't look like you? Yay! She stopped rolling and turned to me, putting one of her hands on mine. You are my beautiful granddaughter. What would I mind? But I try to get different from you. Not so different, she tutted, patting my hand. You know, your dad told me about your mom's shoes. You mean the heels and the dirt and the worms? I asked, feeling my face get a little red. Yes, she nodded. When I was little, I was very curious, just like you. I want to test everything. So one day, I took all our shoes and I went to the tallest window and wham! You threw them? I gasped. Yes, she laughed, to see if they would fly. Did they? I asked, feeling my eyes get wide at the idea of my Nene doing something like that. No, she smiled again, looking maybe a little bit embarrassed. They fell in the mud. Oh no, I exclaimed. Yes, she said. I giggled. I can't believe it. I'm just like you. Truly, she said, giving me a kiss on the head. No, I corrected her softly, and to Jenkins. On Monday, Miss Bloom stood in front of the class and said, well, everyone, did you get a chance to think about your colors this weekend? And I knew for once I wasn't exaggerating or making anything up when I sighed and said, yes, slumping back in my chair. It was exhausting. A week later, we had our end of the year party. My mom and dad came and we took pictures and ate cookies. All the parents admired our drawings, and Colleen's mom said, I'd drawn my expression just right, which was a nice thing to hear. I could see the space between my mom's eyes from a little, though, when she saw my picture, but then she smiled and said she loved it. When all the celebrations were done and she was tucking me into bed that night, my mom said, we'll have to keep in touch with Miss Bloom. She sat on the edge of my bed and smoothed the hair away from my face. What a sharp woman. I like her a lot. Me too, I replied. Your classroom was so pretty, she went on, and I spotted your drawing the second we walked in. Do you want to put it up somewhere? How about on your wall or on the fridge? Maybe later. I shrugged. I didn't know if I really wanted to see it every day. It's a lovely picture, sweetie, she said, and then she paused. I love the way you drew Horacio's hat. You got the shape just right, and the red is so bright and cheery, only everyone's so far apart. Yes, I sighed. I didn't mean for that to happen. I was going to say something else, but then I saw that frowning, worried look again, so I kept quiet. And later, after she'd given me a hug and said goodnight, I lay in bed thinking about what I hadn't said to my mom, because I really didn't mean for my family to be so far apart in the picture. But I think it's maybe just how they want to be.